You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name, and politics is our game. And we will be doing lots of politics and public policy this evening because we have as our guest State Representative Tom Morrison from Palatine. Look, if you're wondering what's going on in state government, if you're wondering if this new guy, the rookie, so to speak, Bruce Rauner, our new governor in the state of Illinois, if you're wondering whether Bruce Rauner is really going to have an impact, well, you only have to look as far as we're taping the show on April 7th. Just take a look at the Chicago Tribune if you've got one, because by the time we're airing, it'll probably be April 20th, maybe a week or two later. But if you go back and dig up the Chicago Tribune from April 7th, you'll see the editorial, you'll see the perspective. You see the Tribune is talking about a sort of Rauner revolution. Remember, there was a Ronald Reagan revolution. So let me just ask State Representative Tom Morrison, is there going to be a Rauner revolution?
Well, you already can see a major difference in Springfield. I started to feel that right after the election. We still had a couple of weeks of veto session, but you can definitely sense a change in environment in Springfield.
There's a new sheriff in town.
That's one way of putting it, sure.
The Republican Party, do you feel reinvigorated as a Republican? Tom, how long have you been there as a state rep?
This is my third term, so 5 years.
So you're
started my fifth year.
You're in the middle of your fifth year.
Right.
Do you feel reinvigorated? Somehow it's different now that you've got one, a Republican governor. We should point out two. I imagine this guy is pretty similar in philosophy to you. Would that be right?
Yeah,
He ain't no rhino. He ain't no Republican in name only, especially when it comes to economic issues, right? He's the real McCoy in terms of economic issues. If you're a conservative, an economic conservative, you got to love this guy, right?
Yeah, I have somewhat of a similar story in that as a small business person. Obviously, he's in a different category in terms of his business background. But as a small businessman, I ran because I was watching the state I love very slowly erode, and it was distressing me. It was causing me to be angry, and I decided I could do something to change this. And if you listen to Rauner talk about why he decided to run, you know, this is a state that he loves, a state he grew up in, and a state that he wants to see great again.
So Ronald Reagan, Bruce Rauner, Tom Morrison, 3 peas in a pod.
No, I wouldn't say that.
No, but Ronald Reagan was once upon a time a Democrat.
I was never a Democrat.
I know. I know that, and I don't know about Rauner, maybe he was. I don't know if he was a liberal Democrat, but he was a Democrat. He became, either he became more conservative or his conservative leanings, especially on the economic side, came out over time. He became a Republican. He gave some tremendous speeches before he ran for governor, certainly before he ran for president. He became the leader. People, even as we tape this show on April 7th, 2015, the one Republican that most Republicans, if they're going to talk about anybody, don't they just talk about Ronald Reagan? They might go back to Abraham Lincoln, but they sure as hell don't say, oh, it was the great feeling of George W. Bush. Oh, it was the great feeling of George Herbert Walker Bush. I'm not saying anything's wrong with W. or George Herbert Walker, but people now in 2015, if they're conservative, they go back to Reagan, okay? Now they might go to Rauner, and in all modesty, Tom, I mean, you have to say, in Palatine, they go to Tom Morrison because philosophically, you three guys are pretty close, aren't you? Reagan, Rauner, Morrison.
Well, on economic issues, there seem to be a lot of people that rally behind the message that Rauner had, and that is we cannot get out of our fiscal mess just by raising tax rates. And so I think that might be one parallel that you would see.
What is the Rauner revolution? Because I know you looked at the editorial by the Chicago Tribune on April 7th, and the perspective perhaps as well. What is the Rauner revolution, if you had to say in a nutshell?
That we need to bring back Illinois in terms of our stature as a financial powerhouse.
What's the word that he uses?
Turnaround.
Turnaround.
Yeah, we need to turn this state around, yeah.
In business, what does it mean when you have a turnaround?
Well, it means that any kind of bad policies or policies that would drive your customers away, things that would make your entity unprofitable, you need to turn those things around. Stop doing the things.
You need to turn around the business. So if you have a business that goes into bankruptcy, what a lot of people don't realize, the business can come out of bankruptcy. There's a plan. You can have a turnaround.
Right,
This
sure.
guy was a turnaround artist. He was an investment banker. They would buy companies that were in trouble. They would turn them around. They would either operate them profitably or they would sell them for more than they bought them, right? They turned them around.
Yeah, yeah.
So he's a turnaround artist. And Illinois is almost in bankruptcy, many would say. Chicago, almost in bankruptcy.
Yeah.
It might be an exaggeration, but certainly in Illinois, he ran on the proposition, Rauner did, of turning Illinois around. And now he's doing that, going sort of village to village, city to city throughout Illinois, trying to persuade the locals, whether they were with him or not when he ran for governor, they should now be with him. He's got money to do it. Then they sort of have this $20 million fund. So as he's making these arguments, he's not a poor guy. I mean, he's now got a fund. If the Democrats, before the elections of 2016, start coming after him, he can actually go to the airwaves, TV and radio, and promote his point of view. Is that what he's doing?
Oh, yeah, he's doing that this week. He's been doing that since he was inaugurated.
Okay.
And what makes me happy is that, you know, look, regardless of where you are in terms of your income, we are all in this together. And that if you own a home, if you own a business, if you have a job in the state of Illinois, it's in your best interest to make Illinois attractive again. We will solve a lot of our social problems. We'll solve a lot of our economic problems if the state is a magnet once again
And if you
for
don't
private
have a,
investment.
if you don't have a job, but you're looking to work, you're looking to be gainfully employed, you're looking to be productive, you're looking to be self-reliant. Hell, if you're on welfare, but you'd like to get off welfare and and become self-reliant, you've got an interest. So those people too. It's not just
That's
like,
right.
do you have a house or own a house? It's not just, do you have a job?
You can be, yeah,
Do you want to be a part of a vibrant vibrant economy?
yeah, that's
If
right.
you want to be there, if you want to sit on the couch, if you want to just collect welfare, well, okay, then you're not kind of on the team, right?
Well, even
But if
the-
you want to get off welfare, if you want to become self-reliant, the Rauner team welcomes you, right?
Yeah, even if, you know, if you are reliant on social services, if we continue going down this road, if we continue with the status quo, those funds are going to be cut because there is a shrinking
Of course.
pot of money that we're all trying to draw from.
If you have a developmentally disabled child, it might be, everybody understands, it's tremendously expensive to raise that child, even with the assistance from the state. If you want to continue to have that assistance, you're sort of cheering for Rauner to turn it around. Now, you know, well, Tom, let me just give you, we'll get to the main part of the show real soon, which will be the was the fiscal 2015 budget fixed? Will the fiscal 2016 budget be fixed? Sort of the nitty-gritty of spending and revenue and all that. But let me just sort of give you take a human feature approach to this, okay? The soft and fuzzy. So people reading the papers in the last few days heard that on Good Friday, what did Rauner do? They said he was slashing grants. A lot of the spending in the state of Illinois is giving grants out to people, and a lot of them are worthy projects. One was for autism. There are a lot of people who are dealing with autistic kids. You can't do that on your own. You could be the most self-reliant person. You need help, okay? For many of these conditions that could be autism, it could be Crohn's, there are a variety of things that your kids can have that make raising those kids, or you can have as an adult, raising them much more expensive. So anyway, Rauner was reportedly on Good Friday. It was even worse because they came out and announced a bunch of programs that would be terminated. People involved in these programs should not spend any more money in fiscal 2015. If you got some of those calls, I don't know if you did, but if you did, somebody picked up the phone and said, what the hell is Rauner doing? Why is he cutting out the autism program? What would you say to him?
Well, I would remind people that we're in the second half of the budget that Governor Quinn authorized. So for the last 4 years that I was in office, every year we had a budget discussion on the budget. Our side was saying, look, eventually that income tax is going to roll back to 3.75 on January 1st. We need to start preparing for that. We need to start gradually spending down. We need to start making priorities in the budget, so that.
You've been saying that, is what you.
Our side, the Republican
You and
side.
other Republicans have been
Yeah,
saying,
absolutely.
get ready, this is a temporary tax increase we had in 2011 that increased the state income tax from 3 to 5%.
Mhm.
It was gonna sunset, not completely back to 3, but to 3.75.
Right.
You and other Republicans have been saying that.
We're saying we
And
need-
how did Speaker Mike Madigan, leader of the Democrats in the House, how did my good friend Senate President John Cullerton, who they claim, John says he won't come on the show because he doesn't get a chance to talk. Tom, are you getting a chance to talk? I think you are.
I'm trying, yeah. But anyway, so that was the last budget we passed.
Just, excuse me, one interruption. You were trying to do that over the last 4 years with your
Yeah.
Republican colleagues. What was Speaker Mike Madigan and his Democrats in the House, what was he trying to do? What was Senate President John Cullerton and his Democratic colleagues in the Senate, what were they trying to do? Were they joining with you, Tom?
No, they continued to spend. I mean, as
They
the
did.
money came in,
Yeah.
the money was spent. And so now
And what do
we're
they want to do
facing-
now? What does Senate President Cullerton want to do now?
Well,
What
they're
does
calling-
Speaker Mike Madigan want to do right now? Do they
calling
want to
for
continue?
tax increases.
So they kind of want to continue to do. They would say to the person who's got an autistic kid who made the call to you, we're with you. We feel your pain. We got to continue to spend. Are you going to tell that guy you can't do anything to help him because of because we didn't adapt to this in a transition? Are you going to be that cold? And are you telling Rauner to be that cold? Say, tough. You got an autistic kid. There's nothing we can do.
Well, what I find encouraging is the governor and his administration have been starting to put a hold on somewhat questionable projects that, can we afford them going forward? I give
Well,
one
what about,
example.
just go back to that.
Well, let me give
go
you
to the
one-
autistic
right,
project. Is that a somewhat questionable project? Could that be, is what you're saying?
No, but advancing what we call medium-speed rail project from Chicago to St. Louis. In other words, the Quinn administration kept funneling more and more money to this project to enhance the speed of train service to St. Louis. We're talking about hundreds of millions of state tax dollars.
What's wrong with that?
Going
Because
to-
people say, oh, we need that train service, it'll promote jobs, it'll promote business. Why shouldn't we keep doing that?
I just don't see a market demand for it.
For what,
And so-
going from where, something?
From Chicago to St. Louis.
There's not a big market. People,
It's served by air.
they fly or drive.
Fly or drive,
They don't want
yes.
to, they don't want to go by train.
No, it's not an appropriate use of, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars.
And
in
if those-
permanent infrastructure,
So it's going to be like a permanent subsidy to that.
yeah.
And if you can take those hundreds of $millions and you're not wasting it, some can go back to the taxpayers.
And some
And
could
some
go
could
to
go to-
funding for autistic programs, for example.
That's your point.
Right.
Was
And
that what you would tell the guy? That's what we're trying to
it's,
do.
it's
Or
not.
lady, whoever called.
Yeah, no, it's not an easy message. I had 3 constituent meetings this morning and talking about that very thing, that we have put off these difficult decisions for so long. The people who are producing jobs in this state, that creating jobs, sustaining jobs, paying a ton of tax revenue corporately and in individuals who work for those businesses, as they leave to other jurisdictions, whether it's Indiana or Texas or Florida, Tennessee, when they leave this jurisdiction, the jurisdiction of Illinois, they're taking their tax dollars with them, which means we have less money to spend on important social programs. As Rauner has said, and I think it's a great line, if we're not competitive, then we cannot be compassionate. And we're not going to be compassionate unless we're competitive. I mean, those two things have to go together. That the government gets money to spend based on commercial activity, economic activity. If you have a robust economy, then you have a lot of things that are taxed, generate revenue, and we can take care of a lot of these social issues. If
Well,
we
let me
don't do
go-
those things, you see Detroit, look at the city of Detroit in the last 50 years has had a complete implosion. Their population is 1/3 of what it was at its height. And so as people and businesses moved out of Detroit, the revenue base collapsed and social services collapsed. It becomes a spiral down.
Tom, we got to get to work. Folks, that was the soft and fuzzy, the kinder, gentler Jeff Berkowitz that you haven't seen before. Now we got to get down to work. Now we got to talk about what have you done, you and the Republicans and Democrats, to fix the fiscal 2015 budget, because you guys got together you actually passed, Democrats and Republicans, a 2015 fiscal budget revised, right?
Yes, yeah.
Is it balanced,
So,
Tom? Is it balanced? And
Uh,
fiscal 15 ends when, Tom?
June 30th,
June 30 what?
this year, 2015.
2015.
Right.
So
So
you
the
just-
fiscal year
you-
15 budget was passed last May.
Okay.
It was passed solely with Democrat votes and with Governor Quinn's signature, and it was passed being unbalanced.
Like you said, it
In
was
other
a
words,
lot of spending, not enough revenue. Now you had to deal,
assuming that the
Yeah.
tax increase was going to stay permanent. Well, that's a huge assumption to
which
me.
turns out it didn't.
It didn't, and we have a new governor too. And so when Rauner was sworn
So
in.
how did you fix it, Tom? Tell us. What was required? Some had said there was like a $2 billion shortfall,
Little less than that, about 1.6.
$1.6 billion. You had to find either more revenue, or you had to cut spending, or you had to find reserves. How did you plug that $1.6 billion gap?
Well, simply put, about a 2.25% across the board cut.
Across the board, everything in the general
May not be
revenue
everything,
fund, but
but-
almost everything. The
Right,
general
pretty
revenue
much.
fund budget was what total in spending approximately?
Oh, last year, for this fiscal year, I believe it was around 35.
So 2%, 2.25% of that is about $800 million. It's quick math.
Yeah.
1% of
Right.
35 is 3.5
Mhm.
billion, and say 10% would be 3.5 billion, 1% is 350 million, 2.25 is about 800 million.
Yeah, but there
So
was,
about half of that was plugged by that across the board.
correct, right,
Okay.
yeah. And then the other part was plugged by what are called fund sweeps.
Sweeps. These
So-
are funds that were set up like for somebody breast cancer fund, auto repair fund, not auto repair, road repair fund.
Right,
Specific projects. These are monies that were, some have been spent gradually, some never was spent. So you guys found this money, are in these things, and the legislature has the power to dip into these funds and use them for other purposes, right?
well, the legislature gave Governor Rauner the authority to
They gave him the authority to do that.
do that, yes.
And
He
they
could
had the
not-
authority to give to him,
Yes.
constitutionally, it was constitutional.
Yes, right, right,
Okay, so they gave it to him, he did these fund sweeps, and that's essentially how the fix occurred.
correct.
He found about $800 million in these funds, he applied it to operating, spending, general operating, and it was done.
Gives him the authority to move it where he feels it's most.
Almost unanimously, all the Republicans, there are only 47 Republicans in the House. You've got 46 Republican colleagues, right?
Yes. Mhm.
So the margin is 71 Democrats in the Illinois State House to 47 Republicans. A so-called veto-proof majority. If Rauner were to veto something and the Democrats voted all together, they could override the veto.
Correct. Mhm.
If they need 71 votes, they got 71.
Yeah,
But in any case, of those 47 Republicans in the State House, how many voted for that fix?
all the House
All 47.
Republicans, right.
And how many Democrats voted?
If I
I know,
were to guess,
ballpark.
probably 18, 19.
So about 20, so only 20 or so, 18 or 20 of the 71 Democrats. A lot of Democrats did not go for this, right?
Correct. Mhm.
They're not on record, because these are cuts, and come 26, okay, and then on the Senate side, what happened? Basically, all or almost all of the 20 Republican senators voted for it.
Right.
And how many of the 39 Democratic senators voted for it?
I don't remember, but it passed by a significant margin.
So it was
in
like
the
probably
Senate.
12 or 15 again, with a bunch of, almost all Republicans.
Almost all Republicans, and then
And then of the 39 Democrats, probably fewer than, maybe about a third.
maybe a third, yeah. I don't remember the exact.
And that's
count.
important, because in 2016, when the Senate, when state senators who are up, and they're only up every
4 years
4
or
years,
2 years.
2 years, there's a stagger, so
Right.
not all are up, but all the state reps will be up.
Mhm.
You can be sure Democrats will be saying, those Republicans voted for spending cuts. Your programs were cut, and then for some of these Democrats, they'll be saying, I didn't vote for it. Right?
Mhm.
That's why, isn't that called a structured roll call vote,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, it is, uh-huh.
So Madigan's fine with that, because when those races where people might be hurt by those spending cuts,
Mhm.
they didn't vote for it.
Right.
Bad deal for Republicans?
Well, I think we're being fiscally responsible.
Yeah.
I mean, the state's constitution says that we need to balance the budget every year. And so that's what we're doing. That's what the voters expect us to do. That's the responsible thing to do.
Okay. let's go to the fiscal budget, fiscal 2016.
Mm-hmm.
What's the problem here? What's the, well, let me just get open-ended to you. What's the problem with the fiscal 2016 budget? If you had to explain it to our viewers, what would you say was the problem?
Well, we have picked a revenue number of about $32.5 billion is the expectation that will be collected in fiscal year 16. So coming up with a budget that spends no more than we take in. And the reason
What was
why...
the revenue that you just said?
$32.5 billion.
Okay. Does that take us back roughly to the 2014 fiscal?
Actually, I
budget
just
level?
checked into that this morning. It takes us back to 2011. So we're
it takes
looking
us
at...
back a number of years. We're
Well,
looking at
2011 wasn't that long ago, and so...
4 years.
Right,
So we're looking at going back to spending levels of 4 years ago.
correct,
Basically before the tax increase
correct.
of 2011.
Yep,
Okay. So going back, 32.5 billion is what you think your revenue will be
right,
right now with this lower tax. Is that right?
yep. Mhm.
And what's your spending level? What was your spending level in the fiscal 2015 budget? Was it 35 or 37? What was it?
15, you said?
Yeah, the one we just passed.
Oh, it was about 35, I believe, 35 and a half.
So you're going to have to
something like
find another. You've made some cuts. You're
Yes.
going to find you either have to find more revenue for 2016, or you've got to find $2.5 billion in additional cuts, right?
that. Mhm. Yeah, I don't remember what the exact figures
And
are.
in fact,
but it's-
even more
it's gonna be
because
cuts.
it's going to because those funding sweeps, you can't keep doing it by funding sweeps.
Right.
There's not a lot left in the funds. So if you don't do any more funding
Plus
sweeps,
those constituent groups that,
right, they're mouthing.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not $2.5 billion. You're going to have to. You probably got a gap of about almost $3.5 billion,
Mhm.
which means you either got to cut spending by $3.5 billion, or you got to raise revenue, or you got to borrow. Or you got to be completely irresponsible and just not do any of those things.
No, we're
Can't.
that's not an
Okay,
option.
so what is Bruce Rauner? He's the leader of the Republican
Well,
Party. What's your understanding, if we had Bruce sitting in the chair right now, and I just said to Bruce, let's just play you Bruce Rauner for a second. You can step into that role, right? Okay?
I wouldn't want to speak for him or try
No,
to
but just
speak
say,
for him,
give it
but-
your best shot. You can't speak for him, but
I can-
you have an understanding. What would you guess Bruce Rauner would say if I said to him, how do you think you're going to fix that $3.5 billion hole? What do you think Rauner would say?
Well, he would definitely include pension reform as one of those issues, that
Okay.
we're going to spend this year roughly about 25% of our budget just on making pension payments.
Okay.
25%. Most other U.S. states are somewhere in the single digits.
So what can Bruce
So-
do in the next year that would reduce those costs? I assume that's what you're saying, is that Rauner would say, we can find some money to cut there, right?
Right. If we
But how can he do it, given that, as you know, your pension reform bill that you passed last year is before the state Supreme Court?
right.
It's been argued, probably we'll find out late spring, is that constitutional?
Well,
Because if it's not constitutional, you're even going to have worse pensions just to deal with.
that's a true statement.
And even if
yeah.
it is constitutional, you still might want to find more savings, right?
Yeah, oh, yeah, no doubt. I had a piece published in the Daily Herald and Reboot where I talked about that.
You
saying-
want to change the Constitution.
I believe
Slight
that that's
digression.
probably,
You want to amend the Constitution.
yes, because I believe that virtually any pension reform bill is going to be sued by someone somewhere. And if
And what do you
that
want?
is an obstacle, then we need to amend the
Give us the
Constitution.
basics real quick.
for
What's the
reform moving
amendment?
forward.
What is the sort of the plain-spoken way of explaining to people what your amendment of the Constitution would do?
Well, there's a line in the current pension, in the current Constitution that said that pension benefits cannot be diminished or impaired. Now, the pension legislation that I have filed in the past and the legislation that Rauner is currently proposing says we're only going to change it for benefits for work to be done in the future. But there are even some that object to that. They're saying once on day one of my job, that's when my guarantee was locked in until my death. And actually, in many of these pension plans include spouses too.
So like the cost of living adjustment, we had a law before, and it might still be the law, is it? Prior to the pension reform bill that was passed,
Uh-huh.
that state employee pensions would automatically go up 3% a year, compounded, even if inflation might be 1%. So
Right.
they called it a cost of living adjustment, but it wasn't really, because the cost of living could go up 1%, but automatically the
Right.
statute said 3%. Now, would people contend, would the state employee unions contend that if you folks did as you did in the pension reform bill, cut this to something less than 3%? I'm try to describe what it is, but it is less than 3%.
Yes, it is. Mhm.
Did they contend that was unconstitutional?
Yes, also current retirees were included.
Current retirees had that right to have 3% into
Right.
perpetuity,
Mhm.
and new workers entitled to have it into perpetuity. Current workers, right? Into perpetuity, the 3% they were contending? Is that their argument?
There were other provisions in there too. I'd have to relook
Okay,
at the proposal.
but so that is the
any-
kind of thing you could
but-
do, but also, okay, so you want, go back again. What is it you and Rauner want to do to amend the Constitution? What essentially will you do on the pension side?
I'm saying that the amending the Constitution may have to happen regardless of whether Senate Bill 1 is constitutional or not.
Okay. And what is it, what is it that your amendment would allow the state legislature to do?
To move forward on other pension reform proposals.
To modify the pension benefits that had not previously been earned. Is that what it does?
Right, yes,
Okay.
yeah.
So going forward. we could
But
move
your initial question was, what would Rauner say? So pension reform has to still be
But
part of
even
the
if it happens,
conversation.
that even if you guys could amend the Constitution, the quickest that would be is in 2016.
It would be a while, but remember
So,
these.
but this budget right now.
Right, I'm getting to that, I'm getting
Okay,
to that.
get to it.
So he would
We're running
include
out of
pension
time.
reform for as one piece
Yeah.
of that.
Hope you enjoyed that show. Look, it's a little different here. We usually just don't stop with our guests because just do one show. But you're in luck. As you might have noticed while watching that, we weren't quite at the end. We were almost there, actually not even close. So what we're going to do is stop right here, and we're going to keep you in suspense, because we're going to come back next week, and you're going to see part 2 with State Representative Tom Morrison. We did this little audible where we called it at the beginning. I did, and said, we got to deal with this issue that people are talking about. We were taping this, this show with Tom on the 7th of April, and, just a few days before was Good Friday, and people were seeing and hearing about Governor Rauner doing these cuts in spending for really important and probably worthwhile programs like, not probably, worthwhile programs like programs to help autistic kids, programs to help developmentally disabled kids and adults, and they're getting cut. And I said to Tom, what do we do about that? What do you say when your representatives call? We were going to focus on budget issues. Anyway, as you saw, that took us a little bit astray, but it was worth it. If you saw that, Tom had an answer for that. Tom had an answer for what caused that problem, which was big time spending by Democrats and Republicans for several decades. And in the last few years, Republicans, Tom said, he might have been right, we're trying to adjust. We're trying to get set for the sunset of that income tax increase of 2011. And, they thought it took a few years. And so they were not supporting what they'd call the extravagant budgets of the last few years of Democrats. Republicans weren't. Democrats were. That was Tom's view. In any case, I think that was a worthwhile discussion. It set the stage. It got everything right. And, what we're going to do now is we're going to go back, have you come back next week to watch the second part of that show with State Representative Tom Morrison, and we're going to finish it. We're going to finish the discussion of the fiscal 2016 fix, that's fiscal 2016 budget fix, and it's going to be a sequel, so to speak. So come back next week to see State Representative Tom Morrison, and come back every week to Public Affairs.